every time that I go to make something, whether it's, for 20 years I cast bronze before I played music, and so whether it was casting bronze or making a sculpture or writing a song, I would tap into a spot that's like it feels like it's right about here, and I would just let that spot, it's like a door, I just let that spot open up and let whatever's in there out, and I never hid from anything that was there. So whatever I was thinking about, feeling, or feeling like expressing, or had witnessed in somebody else's experience of life, I always allowed that to flow as honestly as I understood it. And so long as I'm honest with who I am and what I try to do, I feel like I'll be fortunate to have that. But that's just a guess. I honestly, it feels like, Sam, you were talking, I don't know where Sam is, but Sam and I were just talking about this backstage where, there he is, where it was like, something comes to you and you have to make it. You're messing with these strings and you hear a tone, and that tone resonates in a way with you that mandates lyrics, and those lyrics have to be in tune with, pun intended I suppose, with what it is that the melody that you've now created, and they have to, everything has to harmonize so that when it comes out, people can feel it the way that you felt it when you wrote it. Where does that come from, though? Man, I wish I could tell you, because if I could, I would just write it down in a book and make zillions of dollars. Snow in my hands, winter wonderland, a beautiful quicksand. Drowning in my heart, don't know where to start, how to make amends. Nowhere will this end. New eyes open wide, Dad's big surprise. Here to take your life. Drowning in your heart, don't know where to start,
for having me.
We can start off by having you tell us about your background. So why and how did you decide to do what you do today?
That's an interesting question. Well, I grew up in Claremont, California, and in this music store, the Claremont Folk Music Center. And for the longest time, as a child growing up, I didn't realize that that was even unique. I didn't realize it was special. I mean, it was something that I did every day, so it didn't feel like it was anything different. And I thought that after school, every kid would leave school and come to their music store. Like, I just didn't really realize that people don't have a music store, especially not one like this. So it wasn't until I got to college and I'm looking around at people who are now, who are my peers, and I'm getting a sound education, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, God, I am nothing like the people I go to school with. And not to say that any of them were bad or good, it was just different. And I had to take a lot of time to think about why that was. And a lot of it came back to growing up in this store. And the same variety of instruments that exist in this store, from instruments literally from all around the world, is the same sort of variety, cultural variety, that I grew up with as a child into an adult. And having that much diversity allows you to be open to a lot more in the world and see things from different perspectives that don't keep as many sort of blinders on, if you will. And not to say that I see everything, because that would be foolhardy, but in relation to what I think other people are seeing from a scenario or a situation, I oftentimes find myself thinking, it's a little closed-minded. You could look at that from another perspective, and not really take offense to that, or not feel like that's something against you or something along those lines. And what I do today is complicated, and how that all sort of builds up and takes me to where we are now. I'm a parent. I am a college professor. I'm a musician that tours, and I'm a bronze sculptor, to say a few things, right? Those are the things that I would say that I do, and I'm a husband on top of all those things. So when you stack all those things up, those are the things that I do all the time to the best of my ability. But there's so much more to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so when you ask somebody what they do, is it the thing that they get paid for, or is it the thing that they engage in the most? So I spend a large chunk of time just like, I get out on the road, and after every show I'll stop and talk to every single person that wants to talk, because what's the point of getting out on the road and playing a concert where a bunch of people show up to see you and then not interacting, right? The human connection is what it's always all about. And so so when you factor that in, is what I do just connecting with people, or is what I do playing the music, or making the sculpture, or teaching the class, parenting the child, husbanding the wife, whatever that means, you know what I mean? Like, or are those just all small portions of a life experience that sort of culminate into a larger thing that maybe you can't put a finger on? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how do you choose to spend your time within those realms, like home and work?
That's a great question. I don't get a lot of sleep, so that's for starters, which is okay. I mean, I function relatively well on about 6 hours of sleep. So that helps, because you get more hours out of the day. And I try to focus on what's important in the moment, at the moment, right? And so, if I'm writing a song, then everything has to wait until that song is done. If people want to go out and play, if I've got an appointment, but in that moment, that's that moment. It belongs to that moment, and I try to dedicate it to that moment. And I try to be mindful and respectful of other people's appointments and other people's time, and that their time is important and relevant to them as well. And I try not to infringe on people's time, but at the same time I try to respect what it is I'm doing in the space that I'm doing it. So if I'm with my kids at a soccer game, I try to keep my phone in my pocket so that I'm not texting and missing a soccer goal. You know, I mean, like that's, you can't rewind real life, right? And so I try to be very present in the moment and try to take everything in the moment where I am and who I'm with.
It takes a lot of skill.
I think it takes, I think it takes dedication, and I think it takes patience. You know, there are a lot of moments that tick by, and I would say a majority of moments for a majority of people's lives that tick by where you just don't remember. They aren't relevant, right? And it's those squandered moments that I try to take advantage of, right? And so there's so, you know, it's the moment where you're sitting on your couch and you're just sitting. You're not really doing anything. And in that space, how valuable is that time? It can be time that you feel is wasted, or it can be reflective time where you think about all the things that you need to, you know, you line everything up as to what it is you need to do and where you need to go. And it's sort of like, some people might call it a meditation of sorts, or whatever that, you know, the case may be for whoever it is that's experiencing the moment. But, you know, I try to never squander a spare moment. So if it's available, I take it. Even in the moments where, like, you know, I love basketball. I'm a huge basketball fan. So in the moments I'm watching a game, I'll mute the commercials and take those 2 minutes in between the action to just think about what's next. You know what I mean? Everything tries, you know, the true value of living is sort of like, a lot of people do what I did growing up in this music store. A lot of people take living for granted. I'm here, I'm alive, I'll wake up tomorrow. When you're really paying attention, you know that you might not wake up tomorrow. And in that moment, this moment right here, this could be all of our last moments. And so if we don't take advantage of this very moment right now, then we've squandered the last moments of our lives, right? And that, for me, that thought for me is enough to motivate me to not squander those moments. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then coming back to the Claremont Folk Music Center, your grandparents founded the store.
Yes.
And creativity runs very deep in your family.
It's definitely a family of creative artists.
How has your family influenced you through your artwork and everything else that you do?
Immeasurably. My family has been very inspirational, and all of them. I mean, my grandmother, she could, anything that has strings, literally, if it had strings, anything at all, she could play it. She was a master painter, really exceptional, just conceptually brilliant, technically brilliant, just unbelievably gifted. And my grandfather was a poet and a sculptor, and he could repair literally any instrument. And so when that's your core foundation, and then you have a mother who's a brilliant songwriter, a brilliant singer, musician, a dedicated, loving, caring mother, and then you have two brothers who are both really brilliant, creative artists who are pushing their dream out into the world, and trying to utilize that dream to make the world the safest, healthiest place for themselves and their children. It's impossible to not be influenced by that. You know, I mean, and I'm the youngest of my siblings, and so I was always growing up thinking like, wow, you know, these people are really doing amazing things. You know, I mean, it's really, I've always been impressed by everything that all my family members have done. I'm a real fan, if you will, of all the creations that have come before me, and I'm very respectful and mindful and appreciative of them. I wouldn't be any of the things that I talked about earlier had it not been for all of them. Yeah.
And then I found a quote, I think it's on your website, Last Three Liners.
Yeah.
And you said, throughout my life, I have tried to express myself in a clear, powerful manner, never hiding a single emotion. I confront the world full force, knowing that in the end, the world may win. I possess a passion so intense that it drives me to better the lives of others as well as myself, a passion to see a future that is loved, not feared, and embraced, not rejected when it arrives. So where does this passion and this openness to be vulnerable come from?
Well, one of the things, and I can't, I can give you a lot of anecdotal moments, but I have to be very honest, and which is one of the things that we talked about at the start, and say that on a certain level, some of it is, I couldn't really tell you. I mean, the moment when you, again, and I touched on this already, but the moment when you recognize the sort of preciousness of life and of living, you don't just recognize that for yourself. I mean, you recognize that for every human being you interact with, and you know that whether or not that other person recognizes that the importance of that, whether or not that the individual you're interacting with or individuals you're interacting with recognize the value of each moment, you recognize it, and it gives you this it gives you this appreciation, that sort of joy, that love for living. When you feel that, you want everybody to feel that. You want everybody to leave your presence going, oh my God, yeah, I want to get out tomorrow and do something that I always dreamed of doing. Or, you want to really encourage people to live their lives to their fullest potential and their fullest dreams, because you know that, I know that because I'm doing that, and I know how good it feels doing that. I know how good it'll feel for everybody else. So I try to inspire people to do that, and give people the confidence to do that. Now, that said, there's only so much you can give another person. I mean, ultimately, you have to want it. You've got to love living. You've got to find that love for yourself. I can talk to you about it. I can talk to you about, sorry, I keep touching this, which is a bad idea.
You're still touching it then too.
I can give you that experience. I can tell you about my experience. I can tell you, like I said, anecdotally, there was this moment when that happened, or this moment when that happened. But really, truly, my anecdote won't have happened to you directly or exactly. And you know what's occurred in your life. You know the experiences you've had. You know the things that you've gone through, the ups, the downs. When we're talking to a camera of people who we may never meet, right? We don't know what they've been through. Only they know what they've been through, and they've got to be able to grab onto that one thing, that one item, that one element that allows them to feel strength and power in themselves. And I will say, even though it's antithetical, vulnerability is truly in of itself the only real power that an individual has. All of your strengths are actually all of your weaknesses. Those are the things that define you. The things that you're afraid of drive you away from, you drive yourself like, oh, I don't want anybody to know that I'm this or that I'm that, or that somebody, might perceive me as being this way or that way. And so you run from those things. And it's those things that you're running from that are defining who you are, right? And so those things that are your perceived weaknesses are the things that are giving you the strengths that you have. And so in fact, when you recognize that, there are no weaknesses. There's no such thing as vulnerability. Those are the things that give you character. Those are the things that give you strength. And as we were mentioning earlier, it's like every human being has their moments of feeling down and feeling dark and feeling, alone or afraid or whatever the case may be. I don't care what picture perfect family is on TV, or who you've interacted with and thought, oh, when I lived next door to little Timmy Joe, their family was always laughing and smiling. Nothing's ever perfect. I mean, that's just life. Life is hard. It's a really hard world, and you've got to be willing to get into it and push through it and when you want something, you got to dedicate yourself to it and just fight for it. I don't know if I answered your question, but okay, good.
On a lot of levels. And how does this vulnerability, this passion, and this like recognition of life, how does this come through your work?
Well, I try to write all my music, and I try to write all my songs. And I try to sculpt all my sculptures based on my own either life's experiences or the experiences of those that I've interacted with on some level, and so things are either as everything is, it's either biographical or autobiographical, right? So, but we talked about this a little bit. When you're really paying attention to everybody and you're listening to everybody, you're also listening to all the things that they're experiencing. You're truly listening. Somebody's talking and you're actually hearing them. It's not, the words aren't just, sometimes the words come in and they sort of rattle around and you go, mm-hmm, yeah, and then they're gone. That's not listening. When you're really listening to everybody that you talk to and you're listening to the words that they say, there's a certain level where there's a certain level of what am I trying to say? It's like an undeniability of experience where you really understand what that person's going through. And when you understand what that person's going through, if you, for example, let's say you slit your wrists, right? You try to commit suicide. Now, there's a certain level of that. I've never been 5150. I don't have that thing. But the pain of actual cutting, you can say, well, you don't know, you never cut your wrist, you don't know what that feels like. True. These guys are good so far. But if you've ever hammered a nail and missed the nail and hit your thumb, you've experienced pain. If you've ever, gotten in a fight and been punched, you've experienced pain. If you've ever tripped over something or hit the corner of a table and been bruised, you experience pain. And so then you think, with that experience, and they're not the same, but the ability to then say, okay, I know what pain feels like, and so I may not know what your pain exactly felt like, but I understand pain. And if it's anything even remotely like this, then I can feel some form of empathy, right? And that comes through listening. And when you get that through listening, you can incorporate that into whatever it is that you do in your own work. So, I could sit down and talk to you for a day and learn all about you, and then you might hit some note in me that says, wow, that's a song. And then I go take your experience and put it down into a song, relating what you told me to the best of my ability to comprehend it, right? Now, anytime you take somebody else's experience and you write about it, you're also being somewhat, you're writing about it from your own perception, which means it's also about yourself. So there's you've got to be, it's a delicate balance between who you're actually writing about when you're writing, And then other times when it's about me personally, I just put down whatever is. I don't hide from the experience or from any of that. I just try to allow the truth of my life to reflect itself in my work.
You've talked about how your music comes from your own experiences or the experiences of people you've encountered.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a song that you can think of that came from a very strong experience that you've had, or something that spoke to you from the person where you're like, okay, this has to come out no matter what?
Yeah, they're all that way. Yeah, I don't. So, the songs that made that first album are. I won't put a song on an album. Just like I cast bronze, right? And the moment you cast something in bronze, it exists for a minimum, assuming all things being equal, it'll exist for a minimum of 2,000 years or more, right? So it's a long time. So even though a song isn't exactly the same in that kind of longevity state, I won't commit something to its most permanent state unless it has that feeling or sensation. So all the songs on the album speak to a moment that is really powerful or important or valuable. In that regard, there isn't one single one. I mean, when I think of like, "Can't Stop Now," which is the second song on the album. I'm sorry, "Take It Home," which is the second song on the album. That song's about that notion of sort of getting into that new relationship and and you being so exposed and being so vulnerable and thinking like because when everything's so new, it's like, oh my God, this is so amazing, and then you can feel your heart sort of like getting into that vulnerable space, and you're going like, no, and so and the idea of that behind that song, "Take It Home," is that the moment that the person sitting opposite you starts to criticize in any way, shape, or form, you get so frightened, so terrified that you just want to, grab it and run, right? Grab it, your heart, it being your heart, and run. But then, that gets counteracted with "Can't Stop Now." And "Can't Stop Now" is about having to just never give up and always push through, despite what may come. Right, and it's brighter and lighter and more fun, and so it's like, but everything holds that sort of space in all the music that I write, and then not that I write, but that I write and commit to permanence. I try to put something that when I listen to it, it says something profound to me, because you never know what happened. You record something. And you never know how. I mean, you guys could listen to the album and go, "Oh my gosh, we interviewed this guy. This album's terrible." But for me, that's not the important part. The important part is that when I commit myself to it and I record it and I lay it all down and call it done, that when I listen to it, I say, "Oh yeah, that's the one." Because ultimately, and I hate to say this, there's a I think I said this at Full Circle. There's an element of narcissism that comes with being an artist. You don't make anything and show it to anyone without wanting other people to sort of go like, yay, yay, yay. But those yays don't matter unless the first yay is your own. And that's the critical element of for me, of writing music. I'll write songs and sit on them, and then come back to them months, years later, and play them and say, okay, is this still any good? Does it still hold? Because if it holds 6 months, a year after you've written it, if you can play it and sing it and still go, wow, I'm still getting that feeling. At that point, you really have done something. It's like, oh yeah, I love that. I got to lay that down. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And as you shared earlier, the purpose of the Love Story Project is to help inspire those who have loved and lost to let go through creative expressions rather than self-destruction. Yeah. So could you share your own story of where you have loved and lost?
Man, you don't get to be 41 without having a lot of those stories.
That shows you've lived in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I've been, I lost my father in my early 20s. My grandparents went relatively close together. I've been married and divorced and married again. I've been through multiple dating relationships that have obviously not succeeded if I'm now right in the space that I'm in now. And a friend of mine once said something to me about objects, and I don't know, does that, let me think about if that even pertains to this. I'm not certain it does, but the thing is that, and I don't know where this has come from, but for some reason we all think that, and maybe it's some sort of Hollywood notion, that we're supposed to be happy all the time, and that happiness is the best part of life, and and if I'm not happy, then something's wrong. Something's wrong with me, something's wrong with my ability to interact with others who I'm perceiving to be happy. And that notion in and of itself is so flawed. I mean, there's no rule anywhere that says happiness is the only way to live. It's the only key to existence. I mean, everything is fleeting, right? Like I said, my father, who was an alcoholic, drank himself to death. I can mourn that, and I can take that experience and feel like I was cheated of a father, or because he was never around, or that sort of thing. I missed the playing ball in the park like kids do with their dads. And I can take that path. It's a path that exists. Or I can say, here's a guy who lived his life and had a profound impact on the people that he interacted with, helped create 3 wonderful children, if I may say so myself, and is now gone of his own decision. Whether the alcohol controlled that or didn't control that, whether he had any say or didn't have any say because of the alcohol, it's not really my place to say. Those were his choices, and my job is to look at that and say, what can I learn from that? What can that teach me for my life? What parts of that do I want to take on, and what parts of that would I like to not take on? And then move forward from that, right? And so, loss is guaranteed in life. And with that loss, dependent upon who you lose, is going to be accompanied with some form of sadness. And that's fine. That's part of living. We hurt, and if we really embrace that hurt, it's a powerful moment. We get to experience that sensation, and so then anytime you meet somebody who's had that sensation, you can relate because you were present in the moment it happened. When you medicate that hurt, when you self-medicate that hurt, oftentimes you've got to repeat that experience because you didn't embrace the moment. And so there's all kinds of loss. There's relationship breakup loss where you're going like, oh my God, I'm never going to love again. I'll never, ever, that's it, I'm final. I will never love anyone ever again. And then you see somebody and you go like, hey, who's that? Wow. And then you find yourself back in right back where you started from, hopefully experiencing something slightly different. But, there's no, and then you say, I'll never get attached to anybody ever. But then you're attached to your brothers, your sisters, your mothers, your fathers, and then they pass. This is a part of it. And then at some point, we pass, and somebody mourns our absence. So there's no, I take, and I don't know if it's insensitive or not, but I take a very practical stance on this sort of thing where, I hate to say this because it's sort of cheesy, but loss happens. Pain happens. People get hurt. People, experience things that are tough and difficult, and you've got to be able to embrace those moments and move forward.
So through your life experiences, I'm sure you have many, you were saying with your father's passing, there are 2 paths you could take.
Well, I'm sure there's a million paths.
There's a million paths.
But there's one that makes you, there's one that makes you feel down, and then there's one that you say, well, he made his choices.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and so, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So were you always the practical mindset at that time, or did you for a moment go down that dark path for a little bit too?
I'm going to back up a step from the term dark path because it suggests and I recognize that sensationally, this is what people feel, that it's a space where you feel you can't climb out of. You feel that you're trapped in, and you feel that it's overwhelming you and maybe destroying you. And I recognize that. When we give it the title, then, Dark Path, it suggests that it's a place you shouldn't want to go. Right, the dark alley, it's spooky, the dark path, it's like the creepy trees. Did I embrace the sadness that came with that? 100%. Was it sad, and did it hurt? 100%. Yeah, there's no getting away from that. But I chose to be okay with that. I've always chosen to be okay with that kind of hurt. With the exception of maybe being in like the 7th grade when I just didn't really know. Where you think your first girlfriend's going to last forever, and then it doesn't, and then it's like, no, that kind of, that's one of those moments where you really. But as an adult, I really tried to just understand and embrace the pain that comes with the experience of loss. I don't try to fight it. I don't try to get away from it. I don't try to run from it. I don't try to force it away. I allow it to be what it is. I think it through. What is it? What is this feeling? How is it making me feel? What is it making me feel like I want to do? Am I going to do that? Is it? If it makes me feel like I'm going to sit on my couch and eat cookies for a month with ice cream, am I going to do that? Or am I not going to do that? Am I going to fight that and try to instead go to the gym, or and eat broccoli and whatever so that's these are again, amongst the infinite choices that you have, these are some, and I always try to choose the ones that don't run from the pain and don't hide from the pain. Embrace the pain, experience the pain. If it's about eating the cookies, then I eat the cookies. And then I force myself to go to the gym the next day. It's like, and just acknowledge what's what. Because the moment that you feel the pain and then you want some cookies, you got to eat those cookies, and then you've eaten the cookies, but then you go, oh man, that was a lot of cookies, right? And then now you're not only responsible for the pain of the experience, but you're responsible for the pain of the of the reaction, and you've got to be responsible for all of that. And if you allow that chain reaction to go too far, you can find yourself having to make up for a lot. So like my vice obviously is sweets, right? I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do any drugs. I just, when I saw my dad doing his thing, I thought, I'm going to do a lot of really terrible things. That's not going to be one of them. And so, and so my biggest vice is candy and cookies and things like that. And so, but you have to atone, right? Or whatever that atonement means for whoever you are, whatever you believe in. You've got to, for every misstep, you're responsible for that misstep. And if you can say, I'm willing to eat an entire bag of cookies, and so that because I know that tomorrow I'm going to force myself to get up and go to the gym, then you can do that. If you know that the next day you can make up for that. It's just, there are some things like sweets that are easier to come back from than others, right? If your atonement is, I'm going to go smoke some crack, I got bad news for you. You're going to wake up the next day and there's no gym that you go to just get rid of the crack. That's got a whole other element of repercussions that you have to deal with. And so you have to think about what it is that, when something goes bad and you're embracing it and you're also reacting to it or interacting with it, you've got to think about what the consequences of those actions are going to be for you, for everyone who knows you, for those around you. You've got to be aware of that. You've got to be present of that. Despite the emotional turmoil that you're going through, you still have to be conscious of your own behavior and your own activity, how that affects those around you. So, and if you can take that responsibility and move it forward, then that's a good thing. However you do that, I just never recommend that anybody run, hide, try to escape pain. It's a part of life. It's a part of living. It's a part of being human. Loving and losing is a part of living and dying. And we all experience it, every single one of us. None of us on the entire planet, no matter what your cultural background is, can escape it, no matter how much money you have. You can't escape it. So because it is like eating or breathing or drinking water, you have to do it to survive. It's a part of living. Experiencing that pain through death or whatever, or loss or whatever it may be, is also part of living. It's just a part of being who you are, and you got to just own it. You know, and so that's what I always try to do. I just try to, like, you know, anytime I experience something along those lines, I just don't deny it. I think long and hard about it. I sit down, I take the time to be reflective, introspective, think about who I am and what that means to me, and then how I can best move forward from it. The one thing I really am not a fan of is getting trapped in a pity party, right? Because it's easy to do, you know. Once you start your own pity party and you're going like, oh, woe is me, there's so many people around you that will join you. Oh, that happened to you, I'm so sorry, you poor baby. I don't like any of that. Like, it doesn't matter what the drama was, doesn't matter how, you know, tragic, horrific. Take the experience, look at it realistically. What was my part I played in it? What was your part you played in it? And let's move forward. And I've always tried to live my life that way.
So the sort of meditative state that you're in when you experience and embrace the sadness, was this something you learned internally, or was there something or someone that helped you go through those stages?
Well, you don't get anywhere in life without somebody helping you. Period. End of sentence. And so, you know, having a mother who was a very strong role model in my life and always there and loving me, having two grandparents who were just, you know, you couldn't ask for better grandparents. Very supportive, very helpful, always willing to listen and lend advice. You know, and having a family unit, brothers, mother, grandparents around, and aunts and uncles and cousins who you can interact with, goes a long way. You know, I mean, it always helps. And then I think that some people in their core are born ready to battle the world, ready to just say, like, all right, let's do this, you know, let's move forward. And some people are born uncertain of how to maneuver through things. And not that the people who are ready to battle are certain about what they're doing or what battle they're engaging in. Nobody knows. Nobody has any answers. And anybody who tells you they have any answers to any of the world's unanswerable problems, immediately just chalk it up to being inauthentic and know that that's just a falsehood. Because nobody has the answers. But there are people who are ready to battle and push forward to the best of their ability. And there are people who aren't ready to battle. And the ones who aren't, I don't know. I don't know that they need to, but I also don't know that. You know, I mean, maybe part of their life's experience and part of what they're supposed to give on the planet is the opposite, the you know, the yin to the yang, if you will, of those who are ready. You know, I mean, we can't all be in the same place at the same time, doing the same thing, experiencing the world in the same way and pushing it forward to the same extent or backward. It's a constant push and pull where everybody has their own abilities, and I don't know. I mean, I think that if we accept what each individual's ability is and respect them for what they can do, that can help them move forward. And I certainly had a number of family members who were always that way. And even the ones who weren't, you know, that's another role to play. You know, so like there's no, you know, the notion of rules are things that we utilize to keep our own lives in order. But in reality, you know, if you want to live, you have to eat and you have to breathe and you have to drink water and you have to sleep. Outside of that, there are no real rules. I mean, if you'd like to live out on the streets, you can. If you'd like to live in a home, you can. The fancier the home, there are rules in order to get those kinds of homes. You can't just walk into one because you want one, right? And so you have to be willing to abide by a certain set of rules in order to get into a certain style of life. And so we all choose what rules we're willing to and not willing to follow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No.
And how have these experiences of love and loss, have these shown up in your work in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a sculpture called 7 Calla Lilies, and somebody contacted me and said, I really love your work, and I was wondering if you would make me a mother and child piece. I noticed that you don't have any mother and child themed pieces. Would you be willing to do so? And I thought, oh God, it's the cheesiest. Like the cheesiest of all sculptures is you always see it, the African one, lifting the thing, and I thought, how do you do that in a way where it stays, where it holds that that feeling, that sensation that a parent has, and so that piece specifically is really about loving and this idea that there's this individual who is essentially a giant sort of matriarchal calla lily, surrounded by other calla lilies and holding one in its arms. And as the calla lily, you know how they're big open flowers, and instead of the stem being a stem, it's a child inside. And it's and then I've got another piece called Beauty, and when you look at it from the back, it's just this like beautiful form, and then you turn it around and the face has exploded off, right? And so it's like, oh, and then there's piecing it back together, which is a sculpture of a guy who's literally the entire sculpture. I built it, I broke it, I glued it back together, and then I cast it in bronze. And so all the fissures and the broken, the missing parts, and the dripping glue, and everything stays in it, because when you break something down like that and then you rebuild, it's never exactly the way it was before. It's now transformed. And then in the music, it's in every song, love and loss. It's in every single song. And in fact, most of my music surrounds that theme to one extent or another. I've got a couple that stray from that, but it's something that I come back to regularly.
You said you have kids. Like,
Yeah.
do you have son, daughter?
I have 2 sons, and I take care of my niece.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How are you able to pass on what you've experienced so that they can themselves go through kind of your experiences in like a mature way too?
Well, the scariest part of parenthood is that you don't know if you can. And so you do everything you can to try to pass on all the wisdoms that you have, but one of the natural components to being a child is to reject the words of your parents because they're always there. And again, this has been sort of the theme of this entire thing is, taking things for granted, right? The notion that it's something that's always available, something that's always present. It's difficult to sometimes recognize the value in it. So for example, living, or an incredible music store, or whatever the case may be. And so as a parent, you only hope that for me, I try to be stern. I try to make sure that my children understand their impact on the people around them, and to be conscious of the people around them. And I try to be loving and as gentle as I can, in the firmness that I also have to be in order to make sure that they listen. And it's a very delicate balance. It's a tightrope where I feel like I've misstepped a million times over. I mean, it's just the hardest thing I've ever done is being a parent. And I only hope that they grow up understanding what it is that I'm trying to teach them. All of that said,
we don't get to determine that. I mean, even though we're the parents, they've got their own core selves, and they accept and take in what they're willing to accept and take in. I think, I'm going to knock wood, you know, my kids are great listeners, and they understand what I'm saying when I'm saying it, and they can take it in, and I see them out in the world, even though they're still small, you know, sort of manifesting the lessons, if you will. And so I hope that they grow up and that they don't smoke crack and they don't, you know, do those sorts of things that you can, the black holes that you can fall into. But there's no guarantee. But you just do, you know, for every parent, you do the best that you can, and you hope that that's enough. My name is Peter Harper. I'm interviewing for the Love Story Project, and my ultimate definition of the love story is knowing that you're alive and being willing to live every moment of every day and cherish it, knowing that it might be your last.